Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture something with me for a second. Imagine you're driving home late at night. Maybe it's 2 or 3 a.m. The street's completely deserted. But as you look up at the nearest mega mall, it literally looks like it's hosting a massive red carpet event.
Right, the stores are locked tight, shoppers and employees are long gone, yet the entire building is just glowing. We're talking blinding architectural lights, massive display windows, and multi-million-lumen digital billboards blasting neon into the night sky.
The source material for our explainer today, a fascinating analysis from Vigilant Bharat, calls this phenomenon the ghost mall. And today we're unpacking the midnight glow, India's commercial power paradox, to get into the really staggering data behind it.
So it really begs a pretty obvious question, right? Who are these midnight malls actually for?
Exactly. The analysis points out there is this massive 9-hour dead zone, typically running from about midnight straight through to 9 o'clock a.m. During this huge block of time, these gigantic commercial complexes are fully lit, blasting high-intensity advertisements to absolutely nobody. It's a visually striking phenomenon for sure, but when you look at the structural energy demands underneath it all, it becomes a deeply complex, even alarming, resource management issue.
And here's where the hypocrisy kind of hits you. Think about the everyday citizen. We're constantly urged to do our part to save the national grid, right? Keep that domestic AC at 24 degrees or higher, cut back during peak hours.
Oh, 100%.
But then you compare that to the commercial reality. For premium retail facades, there are virtually zero off-hour power restrictions. The analysis points out this glaring contrast. Everyday citizens are actively rationing their power, sweating it out, while these mega complexes operate under an entirely different set of rules, or, honestly, a total lack of them.
Okay, so let's get into the math behind the megawatts. Now, we have to be fair here, and the source data acknowledges this. A large shopping mall spans anywhere from 500,000 to over 1 million square feet.
Right, and during non-operational hours, that massive building still needs power. A baseline of roughly 200 to 500 kilowatts for night security and basic basement ventilation. That is completely necessary and totally fair. But the analysis draws a hard line between that essential baseline and the purely decorative facade lighting, the hyper-bright storefronts and external branding. That extra lighting, well, that's categorized as pure unnecessary waste.
So let's break down this math step by step, because seeing the numbers scale up is where things get truly eye-opening. Step 1. When a complex leaves all that decorative lighting on, it drains an estimated additional 200 kilowatts per hour per mall. And Step 2 is where we scale it. Across Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, there are roughly 1,000 major retail plazas and commercial hubs. Multiply 200 kilowatts by 1,000, and boom, we suddenly hit a collective waste of 200 megawatts of power. Step 3. We multiply that 200 megawatts by the 9-hour non-operational window every single night.
Which brings us to a frankly massive number, 1.8 million.
Yeah, that is 1.8 million units of electricity wasted every single night. The source really emphasizes that this huge energy drain provides absolutely zero economic utility. The stores are closed, no one is shopping, and yet 1.8 million units are just burned daily just to keep empty buildings glowing. It is a phenomenal scale of energy consumption just hiding in plain sight.
But to really understand the real-world impact of this, we've got to pivot and look at where that electricity actually comes from, because it's not just a harmless glowing light.
Not at all. It's a direct, measurable drain on national resources. This brings us face to face with India's fossil fuel reality.
When you break down the grid metrics, a pretty stark picture emerges. Nearly 75% of India's entire electricity generation needs are met through fossil fuels, primarily coal. Right, and only about 25% comes from other, greener sources. So connect the dots here. When those empty malls are burning through 1.8 million units of electricity a night, they are largely burning coal to do it. And that leads to an even more critical economic metric, 20%. The analysis points out that despite making massive strides in domestic mining, India still has to import roughly 20% of its total annual coal consumption.
Exactly. You see, this is where a seemingly simple environmental issue totally balloons into a major macroeconomic one. We are literally paying for this on an international scale.
To really capture the sentiment of this case study, I want to read this direct quote from the source material. It's biting, but it's incredibly accurate.
Yeah, they point out that the country is, and I quote, spending precious foreign exchange to import coal just to burn it overnight so an empty Zara or H&M storefront can stay perfectly lit for stray dogs. It's some sharp analytical sarcasm, but it perfectly highlights the structural inefficiency here.
We're using expensive, imported, and carbon-heavy fuel to light up completely unoccupied spaces.
So this naturally leads us to the power opportunity cost. If we aren't using those 200 megawatts to, visually comfort empty parking lots, what could that power actually achieve for the country? The source provides some absolutely fascinating alternative scenarios that really put this wasted energy into perspective. Let's look at what that power could actually do if it was diverted. 1300. The source calculates that if this overnight waste of 200 megawatts was diverted, it is enough baseline nighttime power to fully electrify over 1,300 smaller towns or villages. Think about that. We are talking about reliable, uninterrupted power for entire communities. That means electricity for household study, nighttime security, and running rural medical clinics. The contrast the source makes here is incredibly stark, illuminating a plastic mannequin versus powering a rural clinic. And the second opportunity cost is equally compelling, focusing on public safety. Right, from an engineering perspective, a modern, highly efficient LED street lighting system for a highway consumes roughly 20 kilowatts per kilometer. So if you take those 200 megawatts of wasted commercial power, you could illuminate 10,000 kilometers of dark, accident-prone national and state highways every single night. The analysis really pushes us to imagine the lives that could be saved from crashes and visibility hazards if that energy was just redirected to public infrastructure instead of an empty food court at 3:30 a.m.
Okay, so how does this actually happen? The explainer guides us into a massive policy paradox, what the source material calls the regulatory double standard.
Yeah, because clearly the rules are not applying equally across the board here.
The source material presents this ultimate irony to illustrate their point. Think about the reality for a common citizen, particularly in regions like Delhi NCR. Your 10 to 15-year-old vehicle is forced off the road and scrapped strictly by a calendar date.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how well you maintained it or if it could easily pass an emissions test, the citizen takes 100% financial loss in the name of environmental compliance. But meanwhile, a multi-million-dollar retail hub can pull highly inefficient, coal-generated power from the grid all night long for luxury marketing, and they face zero nighttime limits, zero penalties, and zero curfews.
Now, the good news is, the analysis doesn't just complain about the problem, it outlines explicit, actionable risk management solutions. Right, let's fix this. First, municipalities could mandate an automatic 80% reduction curfew on non-essential commercial display lighting past 11:30 p.m. Second, grid operators could implement strict commercial time of day, or TOD, tariffs to make non-operational power waste prohibitively expensive. And third, they suggest localized solar mandates for commercial hubs. The underlying argument here is simple. Environmental accountability shouldn't just be a burden placed entirely on the middle-class consumer.
Which brings us to our final takeaway, and a deeply provocative question posed by the source material. Should everyday citizens bear the sole burden of our sustainable energy transition? It really is a fascinating look at urban policy, resource management, and the hidden costs of our midnight glow. We highly encourage you to think critically about this resource data. And hey, if you found this breakdown insightful, share this explainer with anyone interested in urban policy and sustainability. It will absolutely make you look at those glowing empty buildings in a completely different light.